Hi, so we are continuing with the determination of bearing capacity using the data collected from field test. So today we will start with penetration test, the first one being standard penetration test. Now usually what happens, the data that we collect from standard penetration test or any other penetration test method is usually considered more reliable, for the reason being that the extent at which the explorations are being carried out is much larger as compared to the plate load test. Okay, generally deeper explorations are required when the soil profile is changing. It's very vulnerable. Okay, it's very erratic, meaning it's not something which is constant. Okay, or when there is a water table present or water table fluctuations are to a great extent. So in that case, you go for penetration test. Also for determining various properties like is possible using penetration test. You can find out bearing capacity, you can find out based on the shear as well as settlement criteria. You can find out the density index, you can find out the friction angle. So multiple things are possible with penetration test, which are actually not possible with plate load test. Now when I'm talking about penetration test, I'm actually talking about two tests. One is standard penetration test and second is cone penetration test. So today's lecture we will discuss standard penetration test. The relevant IS is 2131. So what you actually obtain with standard penetration test is the number of blows that is required for the sampler, okay, the split spoon sampler to go by 30 centimeter, penetrate the soil by 30 centimeter. Okay, so what is the test procedure and all? I have already explained this in the previous semester and I have given you all the link of the page on which the video for SPT is already embedded. So you can have a look at the test procedures through the same video. I've already shared the link, or any other video. There are ample of videos that are available for the test procedures. To summarize quickly on the test procedures, we have a hammer of 63.5 kg and it's allowed to have a free fall of 75 centimeters. Okay, so every time you lift the hammer, you just have to imagine like a pipe over which this hammer is placed. Okay, you have to lift that hammer and let it fall under its own weight by 75 centimeters. So initially what is done is you allow the hammer to fall till 15 centimeter embedding of the sampler takes place inside the soil. So this 15 centimeter initially that the sampler goes or penetrates inside the soil is usually called a seating drive. So those blows are not counted. The number of blows that you need to apply for the initial 15 centimeters are not counted. Beyond that, when the sampler starts moving inside the soil, then you start counting the blows. You count till further 30 centimeter is penetrating inside the soil, or up to 50 blows, whichever reaches first. So if it moves by 30 centimeter, you count the number of blows. If it is not moving by 30 centimeter, how much ever you apply the blows, then you count the number of blows up to 50. That is called till the refusal takes place. Okay, sometimes what happens that under its own weight only the sampler will start moving down inside the soil. When the soil is extremely weak, this happens. In that case, you do not apply blows, you just you just directly report the N value as 0. So that's basically summarizing with the SPT. Okay. Now, in this video, what we are trying to understand is these number of blows which are represented as N values. How do you have a relation between these N values and the bearing capacity? Okay. So the first thing is N values which we get from the test procedures, they need to be corrected, and we are going to understand what are these corrections. The corrections that are applied for N values are primarily for two cases. First is overburden, you can see here, and second is dilatancy. Now what is dilatancy? The test procedure, there is a video which I am going to embed in the link description. To explain you what is dilatancy. Now this is seen in cohesionless soils. So you will have to visualize this. Imagine if I take a pat of soil. You make us, you people remember the pad that we had made for shrinkage limit. So not so fine, but something like that. Or you can visualize when we make these naan katais or something, these confectionaries, you know, these biscuits that bakery people sell. So you have to make something like that with the soil. Okay, and you keep it on your palm, flat on your palm, and you take the other palm and start hitting this palm externally. So you have to imagine you have kept your left palm open to the sky. On that you have kept this biscuit made up with soil, and then you have to imagine your right palm exactly perpendicular to the left palm, and you are hitting your left palm with your right palm. This is kind of giving it jerks. So when you do that, if you are not able to visualize, please go through the video which is embedded in the link description. Okay, so you keep on hitting it. You will realize as soon as you start hitting it, the water which is inside the soil, obviously to make a mold like biscuit, you need to add a little bit of moisture, not too much of moisture, and there should be absolutely no moisture on the surface before you start hitting it. But when you start hitting it, you will realize that this water is coming above the surface. Okay, this particular phenomena is called dilatancy. Okay, and this dilatancy is exhibited especially by sands. Clays do not exhibit, and in between soils will exhibit in between. Okay, the reaction. So if your soil part is made out of fine sands and all, you will not have to hit multiple number of times. Immediately the water starts surfacing. Whereas in case of clays, it has the property to hold the water for a longer time. We all know, right? We have heard about permeability of clays, right? So the voids are very small, and it can trap the water very well. So you will require a lot of hitting. In fact, it will not exhibit only any kind of dilatancy. But if it's a C5 type of soil, it will take some time, but the water will appear on the surface. So this is called dilatancy. And second is overburden correction. Now, what do you mean by overburden correction? Let's say I'm trying to find out N value at 7 meters depth. So when I'm collecting or when I'm trying to pass the sampler through 7 meters depth, there will be some resistance or there will be some kind of strength exhibited by that soil because of the entire soil layer. So what I'm trying to say is, let's say this is my sampler, okay, it's going through this, okay, and this is my ground level. And I'm trying to collect the sample from this step, this step. Now, at this step, there is this big column of soil, right? So, when the sampler is passing down, because of the weight of this column, this soil will be slightly dense, or you can say it will have a tendency to give higher value of N. Now, you imagine the same sampler you are trying to push, and you remove this entire soil. Just imagine you remove this entire soil. What will happen to this N value? Obviously, it will decrease. The sampler will start moving very easily downwards. So that is basically the effect of overburden. So what happens because of this overburden is some kind of change can occur in N value because of this overburden. N values vary with overburden pressure. So now if you have tested or if you have performed a test at a specific value of overburden pressure and that pressure actually gets altered, then the corrections have to be applied because your N value that you have collected with the overburden will not be same when the overburden or the soil which is retained is removed. So that correction needs to be applied. Okay, so let's say that correction is C1. Okay, and what is your observed N value that you get from the field test is NOBS. Now your corrected N value will be written as NC1. Now this C1 you can get from a equation, okay, which is given here, 0.77 log to the base 10 1960 upon sigma z dash. Sigma z dash is your overburden, effective overburden. Or you can get it, or you can get this C1 from the chart. Now this is your chart. Pay attention to this. It goes from x-axis, you are indicating the value of correction factor. Okay, that's C1. It goes from 0.4 to 2. And the value of correction factor is 2 for a sigma z or sigma z dash is equal to 0. What do you mean by sigma z dash is equal to 0? That means your effective overburden is 0. When will your effective overburden be 0? Obviously, when you are taking sample at the ground level. So that time this will be 0. As you go down from the ground level, this value will increase. Pay attention to this unit. It is kgf per centimeter square, which is not a unit that we usually use. Although this is taken from IS 2131, okay, but still the y-axis is in kgf per centimeter square. The units that we use is kilonewton per meter square. So you should know the conversion. Please write down somewhere on the book. If suppose this chart is given from IS, okay, or maybe directly if the value of correction factor is given, well and good, but if it's not given and you are asked to refer to this chart, so you should know the conversion of kgf per centimeter square to kilonewton per square meter. So it's 1 kgf per square centimeter is 98.06 kilonewton per square meter. 98.06 kilonewton per square meter, right? So now let's go back to this particular chart. Now let's have a look at this line. Okay, at 1 kgf per centimeter square, what is your correction factor? It's 1. Right? At half kgf per centimeter square, your correction factor is 1.2. Okay. So this is basically how you read it. Now again, how do you apply these correction factors? The guidelines are in kilonewton per square meter. So you imagine this point 1 will be something like 98 kilonewton per square meter. Okay, this 1 will be same as 98 kilonewton per square meter, and I am giving you guidelines for this C1 in terms of kilonewton per square meter. So let's go back to our theory. So this corrected value of n will be observed into this C1 that you will get from the chart. Another way is corrected value of n can be given as n observed into 350 divided by sigma initial effective overburden, okay, initial overburden plus 70. Now what is this sigma 0? It's the effective stress at test level. So this is very important. Okay, what is it? It's effective stress at test level. So this has to be less than 280 kilonewton per meter square. If it is let's say if it is equal to 280 per kilonewton per meter, let's say if it is 280, what will happen? 350 upon 280 plus 70 will be again 350. 350 upon 350 will get cancelled and C will be equal to 1. So if it's anything less than 250, it is not applied. Okay. Then for cohesionless soil, we usually go for this particular correction factor also. Okay. So you can find out in this way, you can find out in this way also, and relate both the values. Okay. Now, when sigma z, that is effective overburden, is less than 25 kilonewton per meter square, C1 will be obtained from figure, not from the equation. When sigma z is less than 25 kilonewton per meter square, correction will be obtained from the figure and it will not be obtained from the equation. When sigma z is equal to 98 kilonewton per meter square, you remember that y-axis I told you where it was written 1. When your sigma z is equal to 98, C1 will be equal to 1. I had already shown. Now, when your value of overburden is more than 98, okay, if it's less than 98 or sigma dash is above 98, value of correction factor will be less than 1. So let's go back to the figure, you will understand it very clearly. What you can see here is if this, now this is, and this point will be 98 kilonewton per meter square. So the value of sigma z when it is less than 98, so I'm talking about this zone, okay, when it is less than 98, the correction factor goes from here to here. So it's basically 1 to 2, okay, and the moment your effective overburden increases, it's increasing in the downward direction, your value of correction factor becomes less than 1. It goes this side. That's what I meant by that statement. Next is dilatancy correction. Now I urge you all to have a look at the videos that are embedded before you start going ahead with the video. You should understand the meaning of this term dilatancy, then only you will be able to apply this. Basically, why is dilatancy correction required? Okay, you need to correct your N value for overburden, and you also, once you get the corrected value from overburden, that value has to be corrected for dilatancy. Okay, especially when it comes to fine sands. Okay, now the equation for correction for dilatancy is N is equal to 15 plus half of NC1 minus 15. Now what is NC1? NC1 is the corrected value of N after you have applied correction for overburden. Okay, that NC1 is equal to NOBS, that is observed value of SPT, plus into C1, that gave you NC1, correct? So you deduct 15, the difference you divide by 2, and that is added to this 15. Now mind you, if the value of this NC1 is greater than 15, you will get a negative value here, so that is not to be applied. Okay, always the effect of dilatancy is to give you very conservative results. Understand? So actually, because of dilatancy, if whatever is the expected value of N, you get the value less than the actual value. So the correction for dilatancy has to be always positive. If this entire thing comes negative, then it is not to be applied. So this is valid only when NC1 is greater than 15. Usually what happens is fine sands or silts which are underwater, which are submerged, okay, these will offer higher resistance to the driving of that sampler, okay, due to development of excess pore water pressure. This pore water pressure cannot be dissipated immediately, okay, because we are talking about fine sands, so this excess pore water doesn't dissipate immediately while driving. So this leads to the increased apparent soil resistance, okay, giving the higher value of SPT. And more important thing that you need to understand or note down is if the water table is below the test level, then this correction is not required. Okay, so this is one important thing. Let's go to a simple numerical to understand how these corrections are applied. The problem statement reads as, during an SPT on city soil, gamma site was observed as 1.8 grams per cc at a depth of 5 meters and N values were 12. Find corrected N value for design of foundation if the depth of water table was 2 meters. Where was your sample collected from? It was collected from 5 meters. Your water table was at 2 meters. So do we need to apply dilatancy correction? Yes. If the water table is below the test level, then the correction is not applied. Okay. this is one of the criteria. There are some more criteria also, but this is one of the criteria for application of dilatancy correction. So based on the location of water table, yes, as of now we need both overburden corrections as well as the dilatancy correction. Now let's start with the solution. What is given is your gamma set is 1.8 grams per cc. Let's convert it into our conventional units, that is 1.8 tons per meter cube. Converting into kilonewtons, it is 17.66 kilonewton per meter square. Right? Gamma submerged will be gamma set minus gamma W. So minus 9.81 gives you gamma submerged. Now how do you calculate effective overburden at 5 meters? So at 5 meters you have the water table present at 2 meters. So about 2 meters will be saturated. Leaving these 2 meters, the remaining 3 meters as submerged soil. So gamma into 2 plus gamma dash into 3 gives you around 58.87 kilonewton per meter square as your effective overburden. So that is 58.87 as effective overburden. So C1 from the chart, okay, you get somewhere around 1.18. Okay. You can refer the chart which is there in your reference books, because this is in kilonewton per meter square. I don't want to go back to the same chart. Okay, roughly I can always show you. So 58.87 is nearly like 60. So I can consider this as somewhere here. The line, let's say my line is somewhere here. Okay, it will be somewhere here. Okay, 58.87, 60 somewhere here. Okay, now you can see your correction factor will be somewhere here. So somewhere slightly less than 1.2. So I've taken it as 1.18 from the chart. If I use this equation, I get 0.77 log to the base 10, 1960 upon 58.87. So that I get is 1.17. So if I consider 1.17, then my correction for overburden will be NC1 is equal to, that is observed N value was given in the problem as 12 into this correction gives me 14.1. I'll approximate this as 14. Now 14 NC1 is now less than 15. If you remember the criteria for applying dilatancy, if NC1 was less than 15, dilatancy corrections were not to be applied. So we do not go ahead with dilatancy corrections.